Stunning new data about fraud in Minnesota. Federal officials say fraud in the state could top $9 billion. And today, officials also announced they are charging 6 more people amid this growing scandal. Our Joe McCoy is here to break it all down. Joe?
Well, Rena, before those new charges were announced, the first suspect charged in the autism fraud case, 28-year-old Asha Farhan Hassan, pleaded guilty to wire fraud for her role in a $14 million scheme to defraud Minnesota's Autism Services Program in Minneapolis. That was just the beginning of the fraud news today.
The magnitude of fraud across Minnesota's social services programs is something First Assistant U.S. Attorney Joe Thompson
Good afternoon.
says cannot be overstated.
What we see in Minnesota is not a handful of bad actors committing crimes. It's a staggering industrial scale fraud.
Thursday, Thompson announcing federal charges against 6 new defendants for participating in schemes to defraud Minnesota's social services programs.
Mr. Jefferson and Brown.
Thompson says 2 suspects lived in Philadelphia and received more than $3.5 million in fraudulent Medicaid payments.
This is an instance of what's essentially fraud tourism, except for they heard that Minnesota and its Housing Stabilization Services program was easy money.
Perhaps even more noteworthy is the overall scope of the fraud investigation into 14 state social services programs.
For these 14 programs, dating back to 2018.
Thompson estimates half of that $18 billion is tied to fraud.
Every day we look under a rock and find a new $50 million fraud scheme.
Thompson shared some graphs showing how these programs exploded in growth in just a few years. For example, the Early Development Autism Program received $83 million in Medicaid funds in 2021. That amount quadrupled by 2024.
Yes, there's a significant amount of money sent abroad, mostly to East Africa, much of it to Kenya and to Nairobi.
Minnesota is not the only state impacted by Medicaid or Medicare fraud. In 2023, Arizona uncovered a $2.5 billion Medicaid scam, and Georgia saw a $463 million Medicare fraud case tied to unnecessary lab tests. However, Thompson feels some of Minnesota's fraud is unique.
These aren't companies that are providing some services but overbilling Medicare or Medicaid. These are companies that are providing essentially no services. They're essentially shell companies created to defraud the program.
In addition to all of this news today, the FBI conducted a raid of another suspected fraudulent business this morning. The program is called Integrated Community Supports, or ICS, and that's a program our investigative reporter AJ Legault has been covering extensively, Rena.
Well, he mentioned a lot of this money going overseas. Much has been made about that. Did he talk more about that or where it went?
So Thompson said a lot of that money that's been sent overseas has been used to purchase real estate. And I'm happy you brought that up, Rena, because there have been claims made, including from President Trump, that this money is being used to fund terrorist organizations. At the press conference today, Joe Thompson said there is no evidence right now that this money is being used to fund terrorist organizations.
All right, still so much more to come on this story. All right, thank you. Appreciate it.